Welcome everyone to this special Lynn Community Television presentation of A Conversation with Tom Costin, Episode 2. My name is Richard Coppinger. I'm here with my co-host and good friend, Joe Scanlon. Joe, in Episode 1, we covered a lot of ground, but still a lot to go.
We certainly did. As I said before, Tom is a fascinating individual with a great oral history of the city, and his exposure to at the national level is something to be treasured here in Lynn. So I'd like to follow up a little on what you talked about last time, was your first interactions with the Kennedys. I believe you had just been elected as a city councilor.
Yeah. I was just elected, Joe. It was about a week after I was elected, because I wouldn't take over until January, and this is November. And I came home from Boston College. I was a freshman, and I came home one afternoon, and I had a call from Ambassador Kennedy. So he left a number, and I called him again. It was about 4:30, and I called him. I got him on the phone, and I said, Ambassador, this is Tom Costin. Mr. Costin, he said, thank you so much for calling back. He said, what I want to do is to set up an appointment with you as soon as possible. I said, Ambassador, I just got elected. He said, I know all about you. I read all about you and followed up with a few phone calls, and I think I know who you are. He said, but I said, but I'm also a freshman at Boston College, and I have a lot of homework. Mr. Costin, he said, I want to see you. And so I said to myself, well, I better see him. So I said, when do you want to see me, Ambassador? He said, what about next Wednesday? He said, take the trolley down from BC, he said, and come right down to Ritz-Carlton. I'm on the second floor. Don't take the elevator, just walk up the back stairs. I said, well, thank you very much. So that's what I did. That Wednesday, I went down and took the trolley, got off, and went up to the Ritz-Carlton, and carrying my books from BC, and knocked on the door. I rang the bell, and his driver opened the door, Frank Morrissey, who later became Jack's driver. And as you people pointed out the last time we spoke about it, when Jack became president, he became a judge. He was a lawyer. But he opened the door, and when he opened the door, I looked across the room, and the bedroom door was open, and the ambassador was on the telephone. And he saw me, and he waved me into the bedroom and pointed his finger at a chair, and he was talking to the owner of the Boston Globe, as I told you the story. And the reason he was because the week before, one of the columnists in the Boston Globe had written a story that Jack Kennedy, instead of being a hero, should be paying for the PT boat he lost, and also the 2 lives of the 2 sailors that died in the accident on the PT 109. And he was telling the owner of the Boston Globe, he said, if I see another deep story like this in the paper, I'm buying that paper and you'll be walking the streets. And he slammed the phone down. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying to myself, what the devil am I doing here? But then he turned the charm on me. He said, Mr. Costin, I appreciate your coming. He said, do you mind if I call you Tom? I said, no, of course not. And then I said, what will I call you? He said, well, call me Ambassador, call me Joe, whatever you want to call me. But he said, I want to talk to you about something very important to me. He said, my son, as you know, is the congressman. He said, and the problem with my son's background is that he doesn't have the inner city workings that you have had growing up, and also what you're doing now, being a city councilor in a real tough political city like Lynn. And he said, what I want you to do, he said, is to help my son realize exactly the legislation that's going through the Congress. If he could send it to you and you'll look it over and tell him how this would really affect the people that you represent in the city council. And he said, if you could do that, and maybe some suggestions and ideas, I think it'll make him a better congressman. I said, I'd be very happy to do that. And shortly thereafter, I got a call from Jack, and I went into his apartment up in Boston, and which was right across the street from the State House. And that's when we started to work out together, and he would send me the legislation, and I would call him, and then I would write it up and give him some ideas and so forth. And this was the beginning of a great friendship. And when I became mayor, he was now a senator, and we had the first house party in Lynn outside of his district in February of '52. He was undecided whether he was going to run for governor or run for the Senate. And this is when he ran against Henry Cabot Lodge. And so we set it up that he was going to come down the house. I had about 70 people in the house that we had right next to my father's house. My father and mother were there.
Pennybrook Road, right?
Yeah, Pennybrook Road, yeah, 28
Wow.
Pennybrook Road. And that morning, I get a call from Frank Morrissey, his driver, and he said, Tom, the ambassador, I mean, not the ambassador, the congressman has a little touch of malaria, and we got to get him in fast, and we got to get him out fast. And so I said, look, we'll have a soft chair for him, and when he comes in, he'll just sit there and talk. Wonderful. He came down. At 12:15 the following morning, he's sitting in the kitchen, our kitchen, having coffee and some of the cake that we had for everybody else that was there, and he was the last one to go. And I kept saying to myself, I just had a brand new job from GE. I just graduated from BC, and I was saying to myself, how the devil can I get him out so I can get a night's sleep and get to work? But anyway, this is my real style with Jack Kennedy.
Such an incredible story when you think back to it, with the ambassador involved and the old Ritz-Carlton on Arlington Street, not the Ritz-Carlton now that most people know.
No.
And that connection stayed with you throughout your entire, till
Well,
today.
You know, actually, what the ambassador would do, I get a call from him every so often. Just he wanted to be sure that Jack was still getting to me, and I'd tell him, yes, we're doing very well, and so forth. So he kept tabs on the, but actually, what he did for Jack is what Jack did for me when I became, after the election. He called me at City Hall and said, Tom, I'd like to have you come down to Washington and be part of my team. So I said, wonderful, thank you so much. And I called my wife, Rosemary, and I said, honey, pack the bags, we're going to Washington. She said, what are you talking about? I said, well, the president-elect just called and wants us to go to Washington. And then I said, I'll be working at the White House. There was a pregnant pause, and she said, if you think I'm taking 5 small youngsters to Washington while you spend 24 hours at the White House, you're crazy. She said, I'll pack your bags, but of course you know how that went over. So anyway, when I called him back, he said, white problems? And I said, yes. He said, well, you know, what was you like? So it just so happened that in the Lynn item, that had been a story that 2 weeks before, that Tom Wilkinson was going to retire as postmaster. I said, make me postmaster. He said, what? Make you postmaster? He said, that job's not big enough for you. I said, make me postmaster. He said, if you want to be, he said, I'll make you postmaster if you promise me one thing. I said, what's that? When I need you down here for something important, you'll come down. And I said, absolutely. So anyway, that's how things started to work out. When we went to the ball and down in Washington for the inaugural, the night of the ball and the dinner was a snowy night. It's the night before, and they brought in all the troops and shoveled the snow. There wasn't a bit of snow on the route that the president was going to take, but the snow that we went through was almost up to your knee. And when I was going through the line, Dan Day, who also was my campaign manager for mayor, he wanted to be postmaster too. He was about 5 people behind me with his wife. So when I got to Jack said to me, Tom, you're going to be postmaster. I said, well, thank you very much. Then I went and gave his wife a kiss, Jackie a kiss, and then I was shaking Bobby's hand, and I remembered, I said, Jack, without thinking, and he looked up and what? I said, Dan Day's coming down. He said, I know that, but he's going to get some other job. He's going to be your boss. And and that's what happened. Wow. He made Dan Day the deputy director of all the postmasters in the New England area.
Right.
Yeah.
So Tom, before we get to all this, and we want to talk in depth about your relationship to Jack Kennedy as president, I know Joe's been doing some research on the conventions, and he wants to ask you some questions.
I just want to talk to you about the 1956 convention, first of all, because as some people may or may not know, that was the last time there was a real active floor fight at a national convention. True. And you had a very integral part in that, as I recall. Yes. And you were still mayor of Lynn at the time.
I was mayor, yes. I was mayor. I went. I also took Bob Weber, who was my administrative assistant, who was a lawyer in Lynn. He just passed away.
Yes, he did.
And he came with me.
Nice guy.
Yeah, But our delegation was right in the heart of Chicago, and right across the street from the hotel was a big department store. And when we first got there, I noticed they were having a big sale on neckties, $1 a tie. So I had an idea. Bob and I went into the store, and I got the manager, and I said, I'd like to buy 200 ties. He said, 200 ties? I said, yes. I want different colors. They had all plain colors, but all different colors. But they also were advertising that they were selling sewing machines upstairs, and they had a demonstration going on upstairs. I said, what I also would like is to have the people who were doing the demonstrations on the machines, if they could, in the tie, sew in Kennedy and VP in the bottom. He said, it'll cost you 25 cents. I said, that's perfectly all right. And so in 2 days, we picked up the ties. And so we used to meet with Jack every morning. I would have a meeting with the group and so forth. And so when I got the ties, we walked around the convention, and anybody in other delegations who had a Kennedy button on, we gave them a tie, just gave them to them. So the next day, all the guys who were working with us, they all had ties on, Kennedy ties. And when Jack came into the room, he said, where'd you get those? And I told him the story. I bought them and did this and did that. What'd you do with the ties? We handed them out. Hand them out, he said. Why don't you sell them and make some money for the convention? And so that's what one of the problems was. The other problem was that the delegation from Massachusetts was not in favor of Jack Kennedy. It was the old group that were the McCormick group people, and they would not do anything. They wouldn't put the ties on. They wouldn't put buttons on for Jack Kennedy or anything. And this is the Massachusetts delegation. And one of the people who was there as a delegate was the former mayor of Boston, Curley. And Curley really did not like the Kennedys because his grandfather had beaten Curley for mayor and also for congressman. But James Michael always had a fellow that would walk in front of him. And I always called him Up McGinty, because what he'd say as the governor was walking along, he'd say, up, everybody, here comes the Governor Curley, say, Governor, wait, shake your hand, come over here, shake the hand of the governor and so forth. And every morning, the New England delegation would meet for breakfast. And when it was the leading elected politician would be the speaker. When it was Massachusetts turn, Jack Kennedy was the speaker. So Jack Kennedy is up there right after the breakfast and giving his talk. And Up McGinty and Curley came walking right down the corridor, opened the door to the room we were in, and walked right down the middle aisle, right where Jack Kennedy was at the end of the giving a speech. And Up McGinty was saying to people, up, here comes the governor, up. And Curley disrupted that meeting. That's what he did it for, right down the front, and just sat there. And the next morning when we had our meeting, Jack Kennedy said, we're going back to Massachusetts, and we're going to take over the Democratic Committee. Now, this is how he did it. He came to Lynn, and he met with the two delegates who were the woman delegate and also the man delegate. One was Mary Kennedy, who was the woman delegate. She told Jack Kennedy right there, I'm going to be for you. And then George Osei's uncle, who was the head of the sanitary department, was also the mayor, the man delegate committee. He said no, that he was tied in with McCormick, and he was going to stay with the people who was in there, and they wouldn't go along with him. Jack Kennedy won that fight though, and took over the Democratic Party, and that's how he was able to go on and do the things he did.
That was after the 56th convention?
Right after the 56th convention.
Because that 56th convention, I guess, From what I've read and understand, that was a very close fight between Kefauver and
Kefauver, yeah.
yeah, and Kennedy, and
Yeah.
probably the best thing that ever happened to John Kennedy. Was
Yeah.
He lost that.
Well, you know, I'm going to tell you another interesting story in that campaign. Right after the convention, I get a call from Jack Kennedy. He said, Tom, he said, Kefauver is coming to Massachusetts, and we're going to take him down to Lynn because of the 3 big GE plants, and we're going to bring him in around noontime. He said, can you have, at the head of the common there, right, where you're taking me, and we've talked about it before, could you put up a bandstand there, and we could, at noontime, get the West Lynn plant of GE, the Riverworks plant of GE, and then all the people from City Hall right in the square, so Kefauver would be able to speak to them. So I said, that'll be fine. Oh, plus the fact, he said, they're going to have about 120 newspaper people on the bus, and we have to buy boxed lunches for them. I said, who's going to pay for the boxed lunches? The Democratic Party will take care of it. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we got the 120 boxed lunches. I had the post-six band. We had the bandstand there. I was going to introduce Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was going to introduce Kefauver, and then he was going to be off with 120 boxed lunches, and they were going to be gone. Kefauver came down, band played, great big crowd, probably about 3,000 people there, fabulous part. I introduced Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy introduced Kefauver. He gets up to the microphone and said, I can't tell you how happy I am to be in front of all you people from Westinghouse. I looked at Jack Kennedy, he looked at me. I said to the band, play a pair, and the band struck up, and he went off.
Wow. You know, Tom, I have to tell
And
you.
you know what?
Go ahead.
I'm still waiting for the boxed lunches to be paid for.
Did you pay for them?
Yes.
You sure did.
Yeah.
Wow. I just have to tell you, for guys like Joe and I that have been around politics now in our age group, to hear stories about Ambassador Kennedy, Speaker McCormick,
That's
James
just-
Michael Curley,
That's just Kefauver. Yeah.
yeah, it's incredible stuff to us.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing was, when Jack Kennedy was running for re-election in '58, he asked me if I would head up the registration drive for the Democratic Party. I said, sure. And then after I said, sure, 2 days later I get a call from him. He said, Tom, he said, the governor wants to speak to you, Governor Dever, and also John McCormick want to speak to you. They want to be sure that you're not just going to do this for me, it's going to be for the whole Democratic Party. So I had to go and see the governor. The first thing the governor says was, Mayor, you remember now, you're representing the whole of the Democratic Party, and I'm a member of that party, and I'm on this ticket here. I said, Governor, this is the one thing that Jack Kennedy told me when I took over this job. I was doing it for the Democratic Party. He said, well, I'm very happy about that. So I went and saw John McCormick, and John McCormick said the very same thing. But he called me Tom. Tom, he said, you know what you got to do now. I said, I know exactly what I have to do, Mr. Speaker. So what I did, we took, every city and town had a Democratic Party. And so what I did, I took people from our area that I knew and made teams of two people. And we gave them some instructions, but the last piece of instruction I gave them was this. I said, remember now, we're doing this for the Democratic Party. But I said, the last thing I want you to remind them is this, that if we get a strong enough Democratic Party in 1958 in Massachusetts, there's a good chance that Jack Kennedy could be the next president of the United States. And they went across the state. There's a book that came out about 3 years ago called The American Caesars, and it's all about that year. On page 213, it mentions that in Massachusetts, they had the largest influx of new Democrats than they've ever had before, all because of Jack Kennedy possibility being president.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And he was really gearing up for it at that time.
That's what he was doing. Absolutely.
So,
Now, the other thing, that very same time, we had, I think I told you a story. Did I tell you a story about the blue shirt and so forth?
You may have told us, but tell us again.
Yeah, the blue shirt,
Yeah. What we did, they had set up, the Democratic Party had set up a time on television where we had John McCormick, we had the governor, we had Jack Kennedy, we had Ted Kennedy, who just came out of the Army, and Jack Kennedy made him his campaign manager, and me, the mayor of Lynn, was going to be the head of the Democratic registration drive. So they told us you've got to be there at 5 o'clock because they've got to paint up your face, they got to do this, they got to do that. Everybody got there but Jack Kennedy. At 5:45, the door opens, he rushes in, he's carrying a blue shirt. He takes off his jacket, takes off the shirt he had on, the white shirt, puts on a blue shirt, and he had nice tan. And when I got home that night, my wife said to me, "What happened to all you people on that program except Jack Kennedy? You all look like ghosts." And Jack Kennedy, a couple of weeks later, he was down in the office, and I said to him, "Jack, what made you look so good on television?" "Tom, it's very simple. If you're going to go on television, you want to get a little sun during the day, and then what you want to do, never wear a white shirt, wear a blue shirt." And when he ran against Nixon and had the debate, what he did, he spent the day up on the roof of the hotel. He had his handlers there going all through the different speeches and what he was going to be saying, but he made sure that he shaved, got a good tan, and wore a blue shirt.
And that's why you're wearing a blue shirt now.
That's why I'm
Yeah, I
wearing
don't
a
know,
blue
Joe.
shirt
I'm
right
gray.
Yeah.
See, you got to know the blue shirt.
So Tom, just to keep the perspective,
Right.
you're still mayor. The year was what, 1960 when Jack was elected?
Right, yeah.
I don't want to make a mistake. Well, why don't you start from there and talk to us about that relationship?
All right,
when he-
okay. One of when we went out to the convention, my wife came with me. One of the things that we do, again, we would meet every day, and what would each get assignments. And I had 2 assignments that he wanted me to take care of. One was I had to work with Governor Brown of California. I had to work with his group, and then I also had to work with Mike Monroney, who was a senator, senior senator from Oklahoma, and he was also chairman of the Post Office Civil Service Committee. Early on, he jumped in behind Jack Kennedy and told Jack he was going to be with him for the presidency. Then, when Johnson came out as a candidate, they were afraid that Monroney might, because he was close to Johnson also, might jump ship. So the other assignment I had was to go to all the meetings of Mike Monroney. And so after my second day there with him, with my Kennedy badge on and so forth, he called me over. "Mayor," he said, "come here, let me talk to you." He said, "Are you babysitting me for Jack Kennedy?" I said, "Well, I wouldn't say I'm babysitting you, but what we want to do, he wants to be sure if there's anything you need from the Kennedy camp, I'm here to make sure you get it." He said, "Look, that's a lot of baloney. I'm going to be with him all the way, and you come back and tell him I'm going to be right with him all the way." But he said, "I don't want you to be bothering me anymore. I'm going to turn you over to my son, who's my administrative assistant." So he introduced me to his son, young Mike. And so after Jack gets elected and so forth, I get a call from young Mike. And I said, "Mike, why? Where are you now?" He said, "Tom, you won't believe it. I am now the administrative assistant to the Postmaster General." I said, "Wow, that's pretty good." Well, of course, you know, my father's chairman of the Post Office Civil Service Committee in the Senate. So he said, "It's a pretty good place for me to be." So he said, "But I'm calling you to tell you something." And then he told me the story. He said, "I want you to know that the president has called the Postmaster General and told the Postmaster General that he's making you postmaster, and he wants you on his board of directors." And I said, "Well, wait a minute. I haven't even been postmaster yet." "Well, the word is you're going to be postmaster, and you're on the board of directors of the." I said, "Wow." I said, then he also said something else. he said, the Postmaster General said, he told me that this fellow Costin, when he speaks, he's speaking for me from the White House. So whatever he does, I know what he's doing, and I want done. So I said, Mike, do me a favor. He said, what? Call every assistant postmaster general and tell them who Tom Costin is. He said, Tom, I've already done that. And he said, what's going to happen the minute you sign in to the post office department, the operators call every office and say, Costin from the White House is here. And that's
Wow.
what put me in a position when I made recommendations to the Postmaster General, such as one of the first things I did when I became postmaster, and before the meeting we had with the Postmaster General staff, I called and had a meeting set up with the heads of every postal union. And I met with them and told them one of the first things that I was going to be pushing for the Postal Service, that no one would be fired because of alcoholism. That alcoholism was not a social disease, alcoholism was a real medical disease, and that we were going to make sure that everybody got help before they were fired. And so that's one of the first things we did.
You know, I think it'd be a good time to just point out to our viewers that up until the early 1970s, when the Post Office Department became the United States Postal Service, postmasters were appointed by the President of the United States in every city and town in the country.
Yeah.
Am I correct on that?
Right. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I know there's one meeting that Joe and I, as former city councilors, are anxious to hear about in detail that you took, as mayor, took the city council to the Oval Office to meet with Jack Kennedy.
Yeah.
Love to hear about that.
Well, there was a national convention of mayors in Washington, D.C. in April of '61. So what I did, I took the entire city council with me, and I called the White House, set up a meeting with the president so that the members of the city council could meet the president, and I also wanted to talk with him myself. But one of the things that probably should, this little story I should tell you before I tell you that story, is that what Jack used to do when he became a senator, anytime he was going to go north, to Beverly, Salem, any place north, he'd always call me, because we had a little restaurant right across the street from the post office called Hennessy's, and all the people from St. Mary's and Glasgow used to go over there. They had beautiful fraps and fabulous sandwiches. And so Jack Kennedy, the first time he came down to the office, called me and said, look, get me a chicken salad sandwich someplace and get me a chocolate frap. So that's what we did. We sent it out and got the chocolate frap, which I had to pay for, and a sandwich. And anyway, he loved those chocolate fraps and he loved those sandwiches. And so every time he came down, he'd want the sandwiches and want the fraps. So, but he also, what he would also do, if he was going to be speaking later on in the day, he asked me if he could use my bathroom to shave and use my razor and use my shaving cream and my aftershave lotion. And so, well, yeah, sure, go right ahead. So this one day, the one day afterwards, he was there and doing that, I found his tie clasp. And so anyway, later on that morning, I get a call from him. He said, Tom, he said, I think I left my tie clasp down in your bathroom. I said, yeah, I have it. He said, great, send it to me. I said, no, I'm not going to send it to you. What do you mean you're not going to send it to me? Jack, listen, findsies, keepsies, losies, weepsies. He said, what did you say? Listen, Senator, findsies, that's me. Losies, that's you. And I keep, you lose. He said, send that thing back. I said, I am not. He said, why aren't you going to send it back to me? I said, someday you're going to be president, and this is going to be my little gift from you to me. He said, you're a nut. Hung up the phone. So when I go to Washington with the trip with the councilors, we're sitting there, and they have people coming in telling everybody about the history of this and this and that. And Kenny O'Donnell comes in and said, Tom, the president wants to see you in the Oval Office all by yourself. So I went to the Oval Office, and when I sat down with him, I said, Mr. President, I have a little gift for you. So I took off the tie clasp and gave it to him. He said, well, it's about time I got this back. He took off his tie clasp, put it in his drawer, and put mine on. I'll put his back on again. And then while we were talking about, because what he wanted to talk to me about is what he wanted me to do for him as a postmaster down in Washington. And but anyway, Kenny and all came right in almost after that. And Jack Kennedy had been up to Canada the week before, had hurt his back, and was on crutches. So Kenny and all came in and said, Mr. President, you got to go out and get the keys to your new limousine with a clear plastic bulletproof top. So he invited me to go out with him, and I went out with him, and he was on crutches. We went out. We had our pictures taken. One of the pictures was in the Lynn item, and when we get back into the office, he said, Tom, two things I have for you. And he took one of his business cards, president's cards, and he wrote on the back of it a number. And he said, Tom, anytime you're on assignment for me, this number will get to me, so use it. So I put it in my pocket. And then he said, the other thing is, I'm going to give you a gift. He took off the tie clasp and gave it back to me and said, now you can really say that this came from the hands of the President of the United States. And I still have that tie clasp. In fact, I think it's here. I think it's here.
Incredible
I brought it
stories.
here. So,
Now, do you remember the names of the councilors who were with you when you went to the Oval Office? Some of them. We know Tom McGee Sr.
Oh, yeah. All the ones, if you go back.
Well, Peter
Walter Cuff?
Donnelly.
Peter Doe, yeah.
Walter
all of
Cuff, I
them.
don't know if he was.
No, Walter Cuff didn't go.
Okay.
No, yeah. Walter
Yeah.
Cuff. But
I'm trying to think, you know.
Yeah, but I know that Hoffman came.
Charlie?
Charlie Hoffman came with us. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Incredible stuff.
It was a great trip.
Yeah.
So Jack Kennedy appointed you postmaster in 62?
No, 61.
61.
When I was there in the office, he said to me, Tom, he said, why don't you want to become postmaster right now? I said, I don't want to have the city have a special election. Plus the fact that Arthur Frawley, excuse me, came back into the city council, voted against everything I tried to do, and he's thinking of running for mayor again. And I don't want to give him any chance of that happening. So if I wait until July, the president of the city council becomes the acting mayor, and we'll give him a little shot. And that was Henry Wall, who wanted to run. So he said, well, that's okay. He said, let me look at my calendar. He said, all right, on June 30th, you're going to be sworn in. I said, okay, that's fine. So you'll be getting a call. June 30th, you're going to be sworn in. I said, that's good. It's my wife's birthday. So on June 30th, it was a Friday. I went to the post office in Lynn. They swore me in. Dan Day came down, and also Steele, John Steele, who was the regional director, who came out of Gloucester, Postmaster Gloucester. And then Monday, I went down to the city council on the 3rd of July and resigned. And the rest is history.
Wow. Never looked back.
Henry Wall became president. I became
Mayor.
Mayor.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, another little thing. After Henry Wall became elected, he came down to see me. Tom, anything you want, he said, you can have. I said, Henry, you know, there is one little thing. What's that? I said, I'd like to be put on the library board of trustees. Gee, Tom, I'd like to do that. He said, but I promised it to Father Myhouse over at the Greek church. I said, what? I said, well, he said, yeah. I said, maybe a little later on or something else comes up. You let me know what it is. So nothing came up.
God.
Oh, well,
God. So from there, you took over as postmaster.
Yeah.
And did you keep up, I assume you kept up the relationship with President Kennedy at that time
yeah.
and did a lot of work for him.
I was on that board. And these are the three things that he wanted me to do. The first thing he wanted me to do was to get that legislation, have the Postal Service go after what I did in Lynn about not firing anybody, and so that was done. That was one of the first things we did. The second thing that came up was that he put out an executive order that the Congress would not be the ones that would be giving out salaries to all federal employees. The federal employees would now have to, for salaries and also the work ethics that they had to work under, would have to be developed by the heads of the agencies and the unions representing them. First time that that happened. So he took away that power from the Congress. And so that was, so then what he did, he made sure that every agency had people that would train the heads of the agencies on labor management. And one of the things he told the Postmaster General, he wanted me to be one of the professors, so to speak, for the Postal Service. So I was sent out to the University of Oklahoma at Norman, Oklahoma, and I was part of the team that prepared all the postmasters. Because as we said a little earlier, in the early days, the postmaster was a lot of times really a ceremonial position for a lot of people. They got a good salary, but they really didn't run the office. They did nothing about it. Well, I mean, when I got in it, I made sure I was going to do the same thing I did as mayor. I was going to make it a full-time job and do the thing that was going to be right. And so I spent a lot of time down at the University of Norman and doing that. And then the third thing that he did was that he couldn't get his civil rights bill through the Congress. And so what he did, he issued an order that in all federal buildings in the country, they could not have separate toilet facilities colored in white, could not have separate drinking fountains colored in white, could not have separate eating facilities colored in white. And one of the assignments that he gave me was to head up a three-man team to go south of the Mason-Dixon line to the big post offices to make sure that this took place. And one of the last places we had to go was in Texarkana, Texas. And if you stood on the steps of the Texarkana, Texas post office and looked down the main street, on the left would be Arkansas, on the right would be Texas.
Wow.
And so we had to have some FBI people walk with us getting to the post office and so forth. And the first thing we did when we got there, we got all the custodial people come around with us to take down all the signs, colored only, white only, and take them down. We were there 3 days, and the union people that we met with every day, they finally said, no, we're not going to do it. We're gonna stonewall this. What we're going to do, we won't eat in the building. We'll bring our bottled water. We won't use the fountains. We won't use the toilet facilities. We'll go across the street. So the third day, I didn't even tell my two partners what I was going to do. I said to when we get into the meeting, I said to my two partners, I want to speak to these people alone, so I want you to leave the room. They looked at me and said, much to say, what the hell are you doing? I said, please leave the room. When they left the room, I took out the card I had in my pocket from the president, and I said to the head of the union, whose card is this? He looked at it, he says, the President of the United States. I said, what's on the back of it? He said, a phone number. I said, gentlemen and ladies, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you 15 minutes to have you go along with exactly what the President of the United States wants, or I call this number, and here's what he's going to do. Within 2 hours, he's going to nationalize the National Guard of Texas and Arkansas, take out their postal units, and bring them to this office, and every one of you bastards will be out of jobs. Every one of you. 15 minutes and let me know. And I walked out of the room. In 7 minutes, they came out and said, we'll go ahead with it. What we had to do then, we had to fly to Dallas, Texas to meet with the next day, to meet with the head of the postal operation for Texas and Arkansas to tell them what took place. When we were going out to the airport, one of my partners started a conversation with the driver, the cab driver, how nice it was the president was coming in a couple of weeks to Texas. And the guy said, if he comes here, he's going to get shot. I said to my friend, his name, take down his name, because his name was right on back, take down his number, and when we got out into the airport, one of the fellows wanted to get a haircut. So I said to him, talk to the barber. And then when we went to the lunchroom to get a cup of coffee, myself and the other person, we started conversations with the waitress, and we picked up, and then we flew to Dallas that afternoon. That day we picked up 7 different people, and we got their names, we got the card number and everything, who used the expression kill, assassinate, shot, when you mention the president's name. The next morning we go into the regional director's office of the Postal Service, and I said to him, what's happening here in this area? And we told him what was happening. He said, Tom, let me show you something. He pulled open his drawer, pulled out 2 newspapers and opened them up with 2 full-page ads inciting somebody to take the president's life. I took the two newspapers from him. I took the 7 names of the people we had. I got home that night and I called Bill Hardigan. Now, Bill Hardigan came from Revere, Massachusetts. He worked for American Airlines, but he was a real Kennedy person. He was just like myself. He handled all of Jack Kennedy's travel during the campaign. And then he got the call, and he and his family went to Washington. He became Assistant Postmaster General for Transportation. I gave Bill Hardigan a call that night, told him what I had. He said, Tom, I'll pick you up, fly down Monday morning. And he said, I'll pick you up at the airport. And he said, we'll go right to the White House. So anyway, in those days, you didn't have the shuttle. So we had to get out and get a flight. I got down there at 11:30. By the time he picked me up and we got to the White House, it was close to 1:15. Kenny and Donald said, Tom, you missed the president. Today is Armistice Day, the 11th of November. He said, this is the day the president goes out to the tomb of the unknown soldier and lays the wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. And then what he does, he stays that afternoon and has lunch with all the soldiers who take care of the tomb of the unknown soldier. So he won't be back till about 3:30. I said, Kenny, I showed him all the information I had. He said, Tom, let me tell you something. We know the problem. We're going to, for the first time, we're going to take the automobile that has a clear plastic bulletproof top on this trip. And the other thing we're going to do, Jackie is going to travel with us for the first time to take some of the play away from the president. So I said, well, that's fine. That's fine. As long as you know. He said, I'll show you something else. Opened his drawer. He had 7 other folders there that other people had told him, don't go to Dallas. So that's fine. I go home on the 23rd for the first time to have lunch at Parkland Avenue,
Okay.
next to you.
Yep.
Okay, I'm having lunch. My wife is in the other room with the TV on, and I hear 3 words, Kennedy, Dallas, and shot. And I cried. And it hasn't been a day since that date that I don't hear those 3 words, Kennedy, Dallas, and shot. And then I think to myself, every one of those days, why didn't I take that card with his number and call him myself? Why didn't I do that? We went to Washington, spent the night with him at the Rotunda, and went to the cemetery and had dinner with his brother, Teddy. And 2 weeks later, I'm down at the post office, and I go to the White House. Kenny O'Donnell was still there. I went to see Kenny, and I said, Kenny, what the hell happened? He said, Tom, he said, when Johnson heard that we're going to take the automobile and it's going to be, he's going to be enclosed, He walked in, barged into the president's office and said, if he goes to Dallas, Texas, and has this automobile, we'll lose the election the next year. And because of that, they canceled the car. I met with Bobby Kennedy and Ted Kennedy at Bobby Kennedy's house that afternoon for lunch. And we were talking, and I told him my part of the story. And Bobby Kennedy said that what we're going to do, either Teddy or I have to run for president to unravel this, what has happened here. And Bobby Kennedy was killed by the same people that killed Jack. Reason being that they were afraid that if he got that nomination out of California, that he'd be the next president. Same people.
Just incredible stories, Tom, and thank you for sharing them with us. We know it's, I'm sure, emotionally hard for you, being so close to him all those years. And we appreciate you coming and talking to us about it.
Yeah.
So what happens from there?
Well, what happened from there is that the president of the Postmasters organization came to me because he was one of the people that came out to Norman, Oklahoma, and when he heard what I had to say, he asked me if I would come in. I was a member of his organization anyway, and asked me if I would be on his executive committee and put on a program for all the postmasters in the country, and I said I would. So I got to know people, and I'm the first person to run for national president with less than 10 years or 15 years experience being a postmaster. I had 6 years, and I became national president. And and what I did as national president, every year we have a national election, and every year, not an election, we have a convention. And every state has a state convention, and then there's a national convention. And it takes about 3 years to get a national convention up and running. But what I did, after I became national president, I had the meeting with our executive committee and said, we're changing our next convention next year. We're going to go to Washington. I said, we work for an agency that gets all its money from the Congress, and we're wasting our time by not being there and talking with the members of the Congress. Every congressional place we have in the country, every state where you have congressmen, there's postmasters, and they listen to them, okay? And so what I did, I made the organization a political organization. And it's because I made it the political organization that we were able to get postal reorganization through. And
That was still back in the day when they were appointed postmasters.
yeah, right, yeah.
So this would have been the early 70s?
Well, no,
Around that
this was, let's see. Yeah, this was, no, yeah, I was elected in '67. In fact, I was only postmaster from '61, 6 years, '67. But the convention was, and don't forget, Larry O'Brien stayed on. He went down with Jack Kennedy, and when Johnson became president, he was one of the few people that stayed on with Johnson. And Johnson made him, he wanted to become Postmaster General. He became Postmaster General in 1967, the year I was elected. And he was one of the speakers. The convention was held in Puerto Rico. And Larry O'Brien was a Postmaster General. He came down to Puerto Rico, and he was very nice when one of his talks to mention how close I was to Kennedy and so forth. And I think that's what helped me to get elected. So, but then he was the one that started postal reorganization, and I was going to help him on it. Then the Democrats lost in the election, and the Republicans came in. And when the Republicans came in, Nixon picked up on he wanted to get postal reorganization through. And so what he did, he had his Postmaster General call and wanted me to come to see him when he became postmaster. Winton Blunt, his name was, and he was a big contractor out of the South. And he wanted to see me at the post office, and I went over to the post office, and he said, the Senate will vote for postal reorganization if we can get a postal organization to say it's the right thing to do. And he said the letter carriers won't do it, the clerks won't do it, the mail handlers won't do it, the rural letter carriers won't do it. Will you people do it? I said yes, and I think I told you I told him there were 3 things that I wanted in the bill. And one of them was I wanted to keep the title of postmaster. I didn't want manager, I want postmaster, because it was a historic title. I wanted to make sure that no small post office would be closed because they weren't making enough money, because the Postal Service was a real service organization for the people of the United States. And the third thing was, I said, what I really want is to make sure that all the pension money that has been paid out and will be paid out to people up to the point we have the new postal reorganization would all be taken care of by the Congress. And then anything new after that would be paid for by the new Postal Service. And he said, no, I don't think we can do that. I said, that's fine. So about 3 weeks later, he gave me a call. Instead of going to see him, he came to my office and said that he'd go along with those 3 things. So what I did, I traveled across the country and I went to as I told you, I think I told you before when we were talking, that I spoke to the postmasters and said that we were the ones that could bring about postal reorganization. When we had our convention in Hot Springs, Arkansas that year, we had 2,500 postmasters. President Nixon sent down Air Force One to send the Postmaster General and the Deputy Postmaster General down, and I had them sit right on the platform the morning we voted on this. We had 2,500 postmasters, and we didn't have one postmaster vote against it. And what they did, they invited me up to their suite that day afterwards, and the Postmaster General said to me, Tom, he said, we're going to make you Assistant Postmaster General for personnel. I said, Red, if I were to take anything from you right now because of what just happened, I couldn't convince my own mother that I did it because it was the right thing to do. I said, I want nothing.
Classic Tom Costin.
No, it's true.
I get it.
It was true.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we're at the end of our second segment. That went by fast.
I don't want that to happen.
Well, we're going to come back.
You
we're going to ask
better
you to
come
come back. And Tom, thank you so much for sharing so many important details of your personal life with us.
Quite a
with
story.
Tom.
Yeah.
Quite very moving story, emotional. And if you'd come back with us again for a third segment, we'd love that. So thank you everyone for watching, and this concludes the second segment. So thank you for watching, and please watch for segment 3, which should be on shortly. Thank you.